In the early hours of December 18th, 1994, a chilling incident shook the coastal city of Port Elizabeth, located in South Africa. A young woman was discovered unconscious on a remote, dark road far from the city. She had been brutally assaulted, and her rescuers were shocked to find that despite the severity of her injuries, she was still clinging to life. Without hesitation, they did everything they could to save her. The injured woman, Alison Botha, was rushed to the nearest hospital. The medical team could hardly believe their eyes. Her body had endured so many stab wounds that it seemed unimaginable she could still be alive. But Alison, against all odds, held on. The hours following this tragic event felt endless, and the lives of everyone who assisted her or waited anxiously for news of her recovery were forever changed. As the police tirelessly searched for the person responsible for such a horrific crime, the doctors witnessed something extraordinary: Alison's remarkable survival. What had happened defied medical explanation. Alison Botha's story soon spread worldwide, becoming known as a true miracle. She herself took on the mission of sharing her tale of survival and resilience, using her voice to transform the pain she had endured into a source of inspiration for thousands. Alison found a new way to live, shaped by the horrific experience she had faced, yet determined to make that experience a beacon of hope for others. This is her story. Alison Botha was born on September 22, 1967, in Port Elizabeth, a city known for its expansive beaches along Algoa Bay. Growing up with her parents, Brian and Claire, and her brother Neil, Alison enjoyed a fairly carefree childhood. When she was 10, her parents divorced, but this didn't significantly affect her temperament. As a child, she was somewhat detached from her surroundings, and her school years were fairly unremarkable, as her interests seemed to lie elsewhere. As she grew older, Alison realized she didn't have big dreams or ambitions for her future. After completing high school, she pursued a one-year secretarial course at her mother's suggestion as a safety net for an uncertain future. During her teenage years, Alison became curious about the world beyond Port Elizabeth. For several years, she traveled abroad, living new adventures and discovering unfamiliar lands. These experiences gradually shaped her character, and she started to gain more clarity about her motivations in life. After 4 years of traveling, she decided to return home, partly to ease her mother's worries about the distance and her well-being. Back in Port Elizabeth, things returned to normal, but Alison had changed. She found a job she enjoyed as an insurance broker, and when she wasn't working, she spent much of her time with friends, eagerly awaiting the summer months to enjoy days at the beach. But one summer day would lead to an unimaginable event that would forever alter the course of her life. On December 18th, 1994, with the summer heat in full swing in Algoa Bay, Alison spent the day at the beach with friends. As the sun set, they continued the evening at her home, sharing pizzas and beers. Later that night, one of Alison's friends needed a ride home, and Alison, 27 at the time, offered to drive her. After safely dropping off her friend, she headed back, unaware that her life was about to take a terrifying turn. As Alison parked her car, a man suddenly approached and got into the driver's seat, threatening her with a weapon and ordering her to move to the passenger side. A chill ran through her body as she realized the danger she was in. Any attempt to escape seemed futile, and she feared for her life. The man, later identified as Franz, started driving through the city, all the while trying to reassure her, saying his name was Clinton and asking her casual questions, though Alison didn't respond. After a brief stop to pick up an accomplice, who joined them in the back seat, Alison's hope of surviving began to fade. The car soon left the city and headed down a dark, deserted road. Alison's breath quickened as the vehicle came to a stop. One of the men asked her, "Are you going to fight?" By then, Alison had resigned herself to what was coming. One man violently attacked her while the other waited. She overheard the name Franz during the assault and realized this was her attacker's real identity. The violence escalated as both men took turns, abusing and torturing her. When they were finished, they attempted to kill her. They stabbed her repeatedly, 37 times in total, targeting her abdomen and pubic area. When they noticed she was still alive, they slashed her throat, inflicting 16 more stab wounds. Convinced they had killed her, the attackers fled in her car, leaving Alison to die, naked and gravely injured in the sand. Despite her horrific injuries, Alison found the will to survive. She thought of her mother and how devastated she would be if her daughter were to die at the hands of these men. With what little strength she had left, Alison managed to drag herself towards the road. Before leaving the scene, she scrawled the names of her attackers in the sand and wrote a message of love for her mother. As she tried to stand, she noticed an odd sound coming from her breathing and realized her trachea had been destroyed. Her head, barely attached to her body, hung precariously, but even then, Alison refused to give up. She felt something wet against her leg. It was her intestines. Determined to survive, Alison Botha held her head steady with one hand and clutched her organs with the other. Step by step, she made her way towards the paved road where she collapsed, waiting for someone to help. In the distance, the headlights of a car sparked a glimmer of hope, but when it came near, the vehicle sped away, likely in shock at the horrifying sight of her condition. As each minute passed, Alison's strength waned, until finally another car appeared. This time, it stopped. Tian, a young veterinary student vacationing in Port Elizabeth with friends, stepped out and ran toward Alison. He immediately grasped the severity of her condition but stayed by her side, doing everything he could to save her. He called for an ambulance and held her hand, offering comfort while she fought for her life. Though panic gripped him inside, Tian kept his composure, never letting Alison see his worry. After what seemed like an eternity, the ambulance arrived, and Alison was rushed to the hospital. Her life would never be the same, but she clung to it, determined to seize this second chance. By the time Alison arrived at the hospital, an hour and a half had passed since the brutal attack. The doctors were stunned by what they saw. Her wounds bore the marks of unimaginable cruelty. None had ever seen anything like it, but they wasted no time. Alison's sheer will to live inspired the medical team to fight for her, despite the grim prognosis. Remarkably, Alison managed to sign the consent for surgery without hesitation. Alongside her signature, she wrote her mother's phone number, a simple yet profound gesture. When she was taken into the operating room, the night stretched on. Alison had been on the verge of decapitation, breathing through a hole left by a stab wound in her trachea. Her exposed organs were covered in sand and debris from the beach, presenting a massive challenge for the doctors. But fortunately, an experienced general surgeon was on call that night. He painstakingly worked through the night, removing every foreign particle and carefully stitching each wound. Miraculously, the knife had missed Alison's major blood vessels. Had they been severed, she would have died within minutes. Her vital organs, though severely damaged, had also escaped the worst, and slowly, her body began to heal. Still, a significant concern loomed over her recovery: the high risk of acute infection. Everyone anxiously awaited the outcome of the surgery. As Alison lay in intensive care, 2 police officers arrived at the hospital. They had a list of suspects and hoped she would be able to identify them. When Alison awoke the next morning, she reviewed a series of photos. She paused on one image, pointing to a man she recognized as Franz Dutoit, then wrote his name on a piece of paper. She did the same when she saw the photo of Theuns Kruger. The police had what they needed, but they returned later for confirmation. It turned out that both Franz Dutoit and Theuns Kruger had criminal records, including charges of assault. Months before attacking Alison, Dutoit had abducted a 19-year-old woman, assaulted her, and later bought her food and a rose before attacking her again. Though he was arrested in February 1994, he was released on bail. In March, Dutoit and Kruger assaulted another woman who was 3 months pregnant. After the attack, they let her go. Though they were briefly detained for this crime, they were quickly released with a court date set for January. But instead of complying, the 2 men had far darker intentions. They wanted to kill, and unfortunately, Alison became their next target. Despite the overwhelming evidence, the prosecutor insisted Alison verbally name her attackers for the case to proceed. The doctors were hesitant. Alison was still in critical condition and had a breathing tube in place, making it impossible for her to speak. The risk of removing the tube was high, but Alison, with incredible determination, wrote a note authorizing its removal. Once the tube was taken out, Alison whispered, "Franz Dutoit and Theuns Kruger." Her quiet words carried the weight of undeniable truth, laying bare the failures of the justice system. Finally, there was enough evidence to arrest the men. By 5 a.m. on December 19, 1994, both Dutoit and Kruger were taken into custody, charged with assault and attempted murder. When confronted with the charges, Dutoit expressed confusion, only to be informed that Alison had survived. With no choice but to confess, he handed over the knife used in the attack and returned Alison's blood-stained ring, which he had kept as a souvenir. Kruger also confessed, showing no remorse and even admitting that they had planned another assault, this time intending to throw their victim off a bridge. During the trial, Dutoit tried to lessen his guilt, claiming to be a Satanist possessed by a demon that forced him to commit these acts. But the court saw through his excuses. Both men were convicted of kidnapping, indecent assault, rape, and attempted murder. Franz Dutoit was sentenced to 3 life terms, while Theuns Kruger received 1 life sentence plus 25 years. The judge insisted that a note be added to the case file, ensuring they would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. With the threat of Dutoit and Kruger finally neutralized, Alison began the long process of healing. Her will to live was immense, but recovery wasn't easy. After months in the hospital and grueling physical therapy, Alison was devastated to learn she could no longer have children due to the damage to her reproductive organs. Returning home to live with her mother, she found herself sinking into depression. Everyone around her seemed to be moving on, but she felt lost, unsure how to resume her life. In 1995, just a year after the horrific attack, Alison met her partner, Botha. The two bonded over their shared struggles. Tieni had battled depression stemming from unresolved childhood trauma, while Alison was in the midst of her own fight to rebuild her life. The couple married in February 1997, and together they began a new chapter of their lives. In November 2003, they welcomed their first child, a son named Daniel, and in November 2006, their second son, Matthew, was born. Reflecting on motherhood, Alison said, "Being a mother is the most important thing I've ever done. Knowing that life is now about someone else is an incredibly humbling experience." In one of her interviews, Alison shared that one day she hopes to tell her children about her past. She believes it's better they hear her story from her directly, rather than through a book or a television show. However, she plans to wait until they're ready and come to her with questions. Since that moment, and after overcoming the initial shock, Alison has shared her story in over 35 countries. She became one of the first women in South Africa to publicly speak about surviving rape, helping countless others come forward with their own stories. When speaking to other survivors of sexual violence, she often reminds them, "You are not responsible for the actions of others. Life isn't defined by what happens to you, but by how you choose to respond to it." In the years since her attack, Alison has written 2 books. In 2016, her remarkable story of survival was adapted into a film titled Alison. Today, she remains one of the world's most inspiring motivational speakers, using her journey to empower others. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.